So I'm speaking with composer Jay Wadley, who has quickly garnered attention and has demonstrated his unique voice as a composer and a storyteller. Jay gained experience composing, college humor shorts and well as a selection of short films. He's also worked as an additional composer on the hit Fox TV series Lie to Me, and his most recent project is the period drama Indignation, a film about a working class Jewish student attending college in the Midwest amidst the ongoing Korean War. Jay, thanks so much for speaking with me today, especially, I know you're in New York, a little bit of a time difference, but thanks so much.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me, man.
Of course. So to start off, I guess we'll kind of head back to the beginning. I'd love to know how you got on, I guess, on the path that you're on today. Kind of when did you first start? I guess when did music kind of enter your life, and what was I guess, the defining point that put you on a path to kind of film and TV composition?
Well, I started out, as I think as a lot of kids do, taking piano lessons and not really taking it seriously. And then, middle school, started playing in some bands, got into punk rock, played drums and sang in a punk rock band, and started writing songs. And that's kind of how I first started writing. And then when I was in high school, I was in choirs and started like in theater and taking voice lessons and everything, and really got into the choir stuff, and through Allstate Choir got exposed to some more modern choral composers that were living in New York and writing at the time, and got inspired by that stuff and some other film scores that I had heard, and decided to start writing my own orchestral and choral music through my, I think it was like Cakewalk Pro.
Mm.
back in like the late 90s. So that was kind of my first experiment with it, and I wrote my first choir piece around junior or senior year in high school and had it performed at the school talent show. Pretty much from that moment on, I was positive I was going to be a composer. There was pretty much no questioning it after
Right.
that point. So in college for a while, I was a double major in vocal performance and composition, and then ultimately made vocal performance my minor. Yeah, I mean, I pretty much fell in love after my first choral piece, and there was no way I was going to turn back. So I was mostly focusing on classical music.
Right. Right.
I made my own like experimental film in college and scored it, and like it was at the Dead Center Film Festival way back in the day, and I actually like directed one of my friends, or was the cinematographer for the like director cinematography for like another friend of mine's like film. So
Right.
in college, but this was like before the concept of really being a real film composer or being involved with film was really actually realistic, at least in my head.
Right.
And then I went on, and in grad school, I ended up going to Yale for grad school. I was at Oklahoma City University for undergrad.
Hmm.
And then I went to Yale for grad school, continued studying classical music composition. And it's kind of there that I was both, I was really still interested in classical music, but started playing around with a little bit more, production and working in the recording studio there. And just kind of getting a sense for that type of stuff and helping other people record their classical pieces and getting my hands on those tools. So ultimately, when I had the opportunity to demo for the additional composer job for Lie to Me, I was able to produce some stuff and send in my demo, which ended up getting me the job. And that was the first time I had actually ever scored a picture.
Oh, wow.
So I was really thrown into the fire as far as scoring for
Network
pictures
television
concerned.
too. That
Yeah,
was
yeah,
wow.
yeah.
What a hectic way to get introduced.
I know. Super, super intense. Like those crazy, week-long turnarounds for an hour-long
Right.
drama
Yeah.
episode, and Doug DeAngelis was the head composer on that season, and he was really great to me, and teaching me the ropes or showing me the ropes, and leading that whole project so I could learn and really just observe that whole thing. And I was doing that from New Haven, Connecticut. I was still living in New Haven,
Wow.
and he was in LA, and we were just shipping OMFs back and forth.
Wow.
So yeah, it's pretty wild. That was like 2000, I don't know, 2008, 2009, or 2009, I guess.
Uh-huh.
Probably. Yeah.
So, I mean,
So
it's interesting because I just interviewed a composer. His name is Chris Hajian, and he's another New York-based composer. And now
yeah.
you're in New York too. And um, I guess what's the decision behind? I mean, what gravitated you towards New York City to kind of start building your career? And Chris has made it a point. He's like, I love New York. This is my home, and he's built a successful career as a film composer. I think the idea is that everyone has to gravitate to Los Angeles because that's where movies are made. But a lot of people are building careers not in LA. Was that a decision, a conscious decision to make?
Initially, no, it really wasn't. And like, had we stayed on to Lie to Me for the second season, I was fully intending on moving out to LA.
Uh,
So I actually sold everything that I owned, in like except for my studio and my like mattress. I moved it into the basement of my girlfriend at the time's apartment in Philadelphia and went traveling, for a month with my sister, thinking, "Oh, I have a job in LA. I'll go back to Philly for a little while until I find my apartment, and then I'll be, back on the new season in the fall." And just there were some changes in the the new showrunner who brought
right.
on his own team, and that's kind of how things go sometimes. And so I had already started my music production company, with my fellow composer and friend Trevor Grekus, who was also a Yale grad, classical composer, and he was Philip Glass's music assistant. First
Oh,
Nico Muley's assistant, and then like when Nico started doing well, he took Nico's place under Philip. So he was working on a lot of his film stuff and watching him, and I did like a little bit of copying editing work for him, but ultimately through them I was introduced to Rufus Wainwright and spent
oh wow.
probably 4 years or so on and off working with him, doing arrangements and orchestration for him for like his opera and his song cycle.
Right.
So I spent a lot of time doing that with him, and that was mostly based here in New York. So that got me, I moved here, got a place, and kind of started setting down roots here, and ultimately, Trevor and I began building the company, and it kept growing, and luckily had some successes in varying like assistantship roles, and that led to other jobs that led to advertising, that you know what I mean. So then we started doing advertising music, which we found out could be, because we actually saw Philip Glass doing original stuff for different like major brands, and we're like, oh, that could be interesting. So um, if Philip Glass isn't turning it down, maybe we
Right. That's a good sign. Yeah.
So yeah, so we kind of started getting ourselves into the advertisement space, and that really worked out. And within a year or two of us like starting that, we were able to build our studio, and now we have like an executive producer in house and production
Wow.
assistant who are really really great and helpful in keeping operations going so that Trevor and I can continue to be creative. So
That's awesome. Well, now you just scored Indignation, and I find it actually very interesting that your director is the great James Schamus, who has produced some of the most critically acclaimed films for the past 20 years, including most of those of Ang Lee, and yeah, this is his directorial debut. How did you get on this project to work with him? How did this kind of fall in your lap?
well, so yeah, I mean, fall in my lap is actually very right. Because I've done some small, very small independent stuff, but
Right.
worked with friends and talented people, here in New York. But this definitely took it to a whole new level. So I was kind of brought in randomly. I was found on the internet through his producer on his two shorts that he was working on for the Morgan Spurlock We the Economy series.
Right.
So he directed these two shorts called That Film About Money, for that series, and Mridu Chandra found me online, who was producing that with him. She found me online and thought the stuff that I was working on was in the right vein, I guess. And so she invited me in to have a meeting with him. So I met with him and we hit it off, and I ended up scoring those 2 shorts, and then about. And we had a great time doing it too. I mean, we really just had a lot of fun with it. And then about 6 months later or so, he gave me a ring and was like, "I have a script. I'm gonna make a feature. You want to take a look at it?" And I was just like, "Yes, I'll do it. I don't care." You know what I mean? But I was just like, "Yeah, of course, I'll read it and think about it." I mean, like, there was no chance I was not going to do it.
Right.
Like, I mean, he's such a brilliant guy, and I enjoyed working with him so much on the shorts that I knew it was going to be, an experience like none other. So.
So when you started working on the film, you got the script, you read it, it came time to start talking about the music. What kind of conversations did you have? I guess, what did the film need musically, and what kind of goals did you set for what the score needed to accomplish?
Well, we started the discussion very early on, like before they even started shooting. So, I wrote like a 6-minute exploration on themes and instrumentation, just to kind of get a sense of what the sound would be like, and also, prove to Anthony Bregman that I could actually write some music, because it's not, he didn't know who I was, so,
Right.
so like, not in any sort of like weird way. It's just like,
Right.
I am who I am, and that was not, I realized that's that I'm fresh,
Right.
So, but James had a lot of faith in me, and was really encouraging and great through that whole process. And then once they shot, and James invited me on set a couple times, and all throughout the process of editing and coloring and mixing and sort of the whole process, he really invited me in to see it come together. And I feel like bringing me in so early, and us being able to collaborate and talk about tone and talk about instrumentation and production style, and really benefited the score, I think, because it was allowed to breathe and mature and grow along with the film.
Right.
Which you don't always have that opportunity, and we were lucky enough to be able to do that. So
yeah, I know most composers have 2 weeks, then you got
yeah,
do it right now.
Yeah, that's intense. I've not quite hit that yet, but
Right.
but it was just great, and like we had some wonderful times. Like, we went upstate and worked over a long weekend, and came up with material up there. I moved my studio upstate, and so, like, just a lot of fun, just like experimenting together and searching through different references. But one thing that was great is that he didn't really ever like give me too many specific really give me specific references at all. Like, early on, you know what I mean? He just talked about tone and, like, about the feel of it, and about the production style, and things that communicated a lot to me without him having to really dictate where it was going. And he wanted me to kind of arrive at that on my own. And it was amazing that he did actually lead me into a direction that, other people on first listen to my score were like, "Oh, it kind of reminds me of this and this," you know what I mean? So
Right. Well,
it was cool.
It's in the film. I mean, it's a I guess you could call it a period drama. It takes place in the 50s. Does the time, I guess the time setting, does that have any effect on how you approach the score and what instrumentation you use? Does the fact that it's a 50s film, does that kind of have an effect on what you wanted to do?
Well, I mean, yeah, especially with regards to the song, but I think with
Right,
the
yeah.
score, with the score itself, I think just the way that it started coming together, like, the film just has a very classic feel to it, and like from the way that James framed the shots, um, to like casting and delivery of things. It just all has this like very like highbrow, like classic, very dialogue driven quality to it, and a lot of it was just exploring and find, but also a little like, he wanted the score to be a little rough around the edges and like feel like, I think those qualities of it make it feel a little bit more classic. And we approached the score from the production standpoint, like recording with the strings, in a more concerto like setting, with like the soloist, in the orchestra, not like super close mic'd and separated and like,
Right.
like in a different space than the orchestra. It's like everyone feels like they're in the room together. When in a lot of cases they were. So,
So when you first, I guess maybe not just on this film, but anything that you work on, what's kind of the first thing that I guess that sparks, I guess the first note to come out of your head? Is it the character? Is it a line of dialogue? Is it maybe just the overall plot? What kind of gets that first thing coming, kind of the music to start rolling?
I mean, I think I start thinking about tone
Hmm.
before I really get to anything too specific, and structure and kind of overarching concepts rather
Right.
than specifics. But I mean, it really can be anything. It could be just like, generally I'll sit at the piano just for a while and just kind of play around with different ideas and chords, and while I'm watching the film, or sometimes, if I've ingested it enough, or digested it enough, uh, that I feel like I can kind of get this general sense of it, I might just work without picture. But
Right.
sometimes I'll just sit and it'll be a chord or a chord progression, or a melodic line that's in my head or something. But it's never. I wouldn't say it's ever really the same. And it's just kind of like trying to absorb as much of the film as you can, and then finding that moment and like latching onto it when something does arrive. So it's
Uh,
kind of more like listening to your intuition, and just like, you know waiting for that moment to arrive, because you could force it as much as you want, but I feel like it just takes time, and it takes your like brain just a little bit of time to process everything, and then ultimately you know
right.
you just kind of listen to it, and you'll find there. I know that's like super like, ephemeral and like not just not specific, but I
Yeah.
do I do feel like it's a very intuitive thing.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
like,
absolutely. And you're talking about tone a lot too, and I feel like tone. You're talking about finding the right tone. I feel like finding the right tone would be such. I mean, such a hard thing to do because music, I think, sets the tone, and you can automatically change the tone of a scene just based on the music, no matter what the scene is. Is it a challenge to find the tone without maybe becoming too melodramatic? Because it is kind of a period drama. Was it kind of about finding a push and pull of how much, I guess, placement the music was taking, how much music there was and all that stuff.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I think, on a first reading, the way that I had sort of imagined the score was much heavier than where we ended up, and I think, it just took a little time for once, I got a sense of how the actual visuals felt, because I was going purely based on the script,
Right.
but it was much drier than than I had initially anticipated, I think. And so, very, very subtle and very beautiful and simple and direct, and um, not relying upon any tricks or anything. You know what I mean? So,
Yeah, yeah.
just really solid classic filmmaking.
Yeah, it's a great score. You did a really great job. I mean, it absorbs you as a listener. I feel like it's almost, it has a seductive quality to it. It really kind of, I don't know, it pulled me in when I was listening to it, very much.
Awesome. Great. Well, thanks, man. Yeah. I mean, like that's one of the things that once we found out, like, where, because you tend to like slather it on and like pull a lot of stuff out and just
Right.
like pull, so but James was always very deliberate about where he wanted cues and where he didn't want cues and where things should come in and where they should and where they should go out and so that was pretty cut and dry, pretty clear. There weren't really many moments where we were debating for too long about whether or not there should be music. And never really over dialogue. So, once we found a place that sat well, I think with the tone of the dialogue, because the dialogue is very smart and there's a lot of dialogue. Found something that sort of pairs well with that type of higher brow intellect thing.
Yeah.
But has the right amount of emotion without like trying to sort of telegraph too much.
Yeah.
And I think the moment that we finally found that was in one of the middle scenes where we actually first time we introduced the piano at all initially was when Marcus is reading the note from Olivia, and it's a very very simple piano piece, which we ultimately used at the beginning and brought it into that portion, and so you hear it a couple times throughout the film. But once we found that kind of set the tone for like how much is just enough emotion without being too heavy-handed, and then from there we could really grow.
Right. Well, it sounds like you had an amazing experience because you had such a great director. And I guess this next question maybe won't apply to James because it seems like you guys had such a great working relationship. But do you find yourself, do you getting nervous, or is it nerve-wracking at all when you have to present your music to a director or a producer, or does it something?
All the time.
Yeah. Is
Yeah.
it?
No, I'm my own worst critic, and I hate everything I do.
Wow.
Like pretty much from the moment that it comes out, like I'm judging it and judging myself, and I get down on myself. I'm like, oh my god, I'm the worst composer I've ever. Like I'm a fraud. Like you constantly feel like they're gonna find you out, and you're like instantaneously gonna get fired. So, but James is really great, and it definitely helped having already worked on the short with him.
Right.
That he. Because when I was working on the short, I'd want to like really perfect something and like correct all these things and before showing it to him. But he's such a like champion of the process and understanding of the process of creation that he can see it like when it's still 5 steps out or whatever. He can see it for what it is and where some people might not have the same type of imagination and like making that leap, he's able to see where it can go and what the potential it has.
Well, I mean, the whole process. It sounds like you had a really fantastic collaboration with him, and yeah, congrats on the score because it is a really fantastic score there. It's very the melodies, the thematic arcs and everything, and then just the way it pulls you in. It's really great.
Thank you so much.
But to wrap up, I always like to ask this one question to composers. If you could score any film ever made with no disrespect to the original composer or the score, what film would you choose?
Man, see, I think I would have. I think I would have probably. I wish I wouldn't have done it any differently. But I wish I had written it.
Right. That's the idea.
There will be blood. Yeah. I wish. Yeah, I wish I wrote that. I know it's from. I know it's from an orchestra piece that he had, or a lot of it is from an orchestra piece he had previously written. But honestly, I love how that score and the picture work together, and I know it's definitely a more commanding score, and it has a much bigger presence in that film than certainly than mine does in Indignation. But I just oh man.
The opening is there's no dialogue for the first, if I remember correctly, for like the first 8 minutes or something like that.
I know.
That's
It's so good. And like, I was always a big fan of Paul Thomas Anderson stuff, and even like, one of yeah, I loved John Bryan's Punch Drunk Love score as well.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, well, that's a
Super.
fantastic choice. Jay, thank you so much for your time tonight. It was great chatting with you, and it's really enlightening to hear your process with James. It's you guys did a fantastic job, and hopefully we get to talk again soon.
Sounds good. Thank you so much for having me.